All right, well, this is part two of a two-part video. First part got a lot longer than what I thought it'd be, so I'm gonna wrap it up in this video. So if you hadn't checked out the previous video, the one where we talked about our planter and all the precision systems that we had on there and how well I liked them, I suggest you go back and watch that first before continuing on to this video. But anyway, I promise I take you out to the field, show you what our crops look like a few weeks after planting, see what kind of job the precision planting's done and how well they're coming along. So that's what we're going to do in this video here. All right, get our bike out so we can make quick work of this. As you can tell, we've already done a little bit of crop scouting here. All right, this is the very first corn we planted. It's been almost 5 weeks since we got this corn planted. It's all around the V7, V8 stage. We've made 3 passes over our corn since we planted. The first one was a straight roundup. Second one was roundup and atrazine and Realm Q, and then the third one was our nitrogen. Normally those first 2 herbicide applications we do that in one trip, but when we need to spray Roundup, there wasn't any rain in the forecast, and there's no sense in putting out pre-emerge residual chemicals if there's no rain to incorporate those chemicals into the soil. They just sit on the soil and the sunlight degrades their performance and everything. So we held off and we waited till rain was forecast, and we come back with atrazine and Realm Q. And then we made our second and third pass last week with our side dress application of nitrogen that we variable rated across the farm. We run it through our sprayer. We run drop hoses from our sprayer down each middle, and then we variable rated based upon our planting population, which is based upon what we think the yield potential is. So this corn, before we bring the combine in here, is really only going to need one more application. We'll come back at right after tasseling. We'll come back with a fungicide, and then it'll be ready for combine. So this corn crop is, I've done about all the management to it that we can do. But, looking out here, I mean, this corn looks fantastic. Some of the best looking corn I've had in quite a few years. We got an absolutely picture perfect stand out here. We got nice, even spacing right there. We got one seed didn't come up. It's all uniform, all looking good. Our cover crop is completely dead, no other weeds coming out. This cover crop will help provide a mulch to help prevent other weeds from coming up. Right now we got real good soil moisture. I mean, corn is really taking off, really starting to grow. You give it another week of these warm temperatures we got, it'll be on up here and it'll be at tasseling before we know it. Now, because this kind of ties into our planter video, let's talk about how the planter performed here. You can see right here, we've got our inrows, and then we've got the main part of the field. And then, the electric motors on the row units did their job of shutting off. I've got it set to where it only plants up to about a half of a row before it gets to previous coverage pass, and you can tell that the planter shut off right here, right before it got to the row, and then there's nothing over here on this row. And you remember when I was talking to you about the turn compensation going around a curve? We'll take a look at that. Uh-oh, we got a little bit of sprayer blight there. And a little more sprayer blight. All right, if you look right here where we're planting the inrows, you know, we go around a fairly tight curve. And if you got hydraulic drive or a transmission on the planter, as the planter's going around this curve here, the shafts and the meters are all turning at one speed. And over here on the inside of the curve, the row units are not traveling as far, and you'll have seeds closer together than what you want. But here on where the outside units of the planter are running, they're going a farther distance, and the seeding rate's not going to be as high as what you want it to be. And then right here in the middle, it should be about perfect. Now the corn's not going to look that great right here next to the tree line, but you can see, you know, we've got, you know, the plants are not stacked upon one another. I don't have a tape measure here with me, but I'd say there's probably about between 5 and 6 inches in between the plants. Now that's row 1. Let's go over here to row 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, and then you go over here on row 12. We got about the same distance. Well, there's one plant didn't come up, but we got about the same distance in between the plants. And that's one of the benefits of turn compensation. Now, is it going to be a big yield saver or yield maker? No, but every little thing that you can do to add a few bushels here and there, you know, it all adds up over the course of a field. All right, let's pull up one of these corn plants and see what the roots look like. All right, looking at the root system, you can see how the roots are coming down and out at about a 45-degree angle, which is exactly what you want. In fact, we got some brace roots right there starting to come out. And where the hydraulic downforce comes into play is that you only run just enough down pressure to get your row units to put the seed in the ground accurately without putting out too much down pressure. You put out too much down pressure, well, then you can compact the soil around the seed slot, and then the roots don't really want to penetrate that, and then they'll tend to like grow straight down instead of growing out at a 45-degree angle. Either that, or they'll start growing completely horizontally without going down. So you can tell right there, the delta force did its job. We didn't get any compaction of the seed trench, and the roots are growing optimally right now. Now, I'm not going to take you to all of our cornfields. I mean, all of it looks great, just like this. Some of it's a little bit farther behind when we ended up planting, so it's going to be, you know, 1 or 2 collars behind this. But overall, we've got a phenomenal stand on our corn crop, nice and even, just starting to get a taste of that nitrogen we put out last week. And you know, I'd say right now we've got about as close to 100% yield potential as what we can have at this point in the year. Don't have anything limiting yield potential right now. The corn plant has already decided how many rows around on that cob it's going to place. It usually does that by V5, and any planter performance problems you have will directly affect how many rows around you're going to get on the cob. So right now I'm tickled with the job that the planter did, and I'm tickled with the way my corn crop looks. So we got corn out of the way. Let's go take a look at some soybeans. All right, here we are in my soybean field, my one and only full season soybean field, because we only had 80 acres of full season beans this year. And don't judge me on the way this looks. It looks like, well, there's nothing out here but a bunch of weeds, and really all it is the cover crop putting back out after we burned it down with paraquat. And ideally, I would have liked to have sprayed this last week with Roundup and Prefix, but it rained all last week, so we weren't able to get in here and spray it. But it's on the to-do list for either tomorrow or Wednesday. We'll get in here, Roundup and Prefix, get all this cleaned up, and it'll look just fine in about a week after that. But I mean, right now, you know, there's, you know, soybeans, the cover crop putting back out, it's not hurting the soybean crop at all. Soybeans still growing fine. You can tell, you know, we got a pretty dang good stand of beans. It's got its first and second trifolia put out, starting to put out its third trifolia, so it's just right for prefix. You know, there's been a little feeding of some insects on the leaves. Again, that's no big deal. It's not going to hurt hurt yield at all. You know, generally this time of year, soybeans just getting started, they usually look pretty tough, but it really doesn't have any effect on yield as long as you got the plants out here, and we've got a good stand of beans. Now this is going to be a good spot to kind of show you the difference between traditional closing systems and the furrow force that we put on our planter. You know, what we got on the front units of our planter are the traditional V closing style wheels, the rubber wheels. You set spring tension on them for whatever you think it's going to take to close the seed trench, and I've never been a big fan of those. Seem like you really got to use a lot more down force than you want to in order to get the seed trench closed completely, especially in the conditions we plant with, a lot of roots in the ground and everything. It's really tough to close that seed trench. So I'm going to show you here the difference between the traditional V-style closing wheels and then the furrow force that we've got on the planter. All right, right here we got 3 rows we're going to look at. 2 of them were furrow force. This row right here, and then this row right here had the furrow force on it, and then this one here in the middle had the traditional V-style closing wheels. Now you can tell, I mean, we were able to get the seed trench closed with the V-style closing wheels, but it takes a whole lot of down pressure. And comparing this row, and this row, you can see we don't have quite as good a stand on the front units that are using the V-style closing wheels as opposed to the furrow force right here. And this is something I noticed when you're planting early season into really kind of heavy soils, maybe heavier than what you want it to be. The V-style closing wheels, I mean, really packs the seed in, and you don't get as good of a stand as you do with, you know, say the furrow force or the double disc closing type systems that, you know, that close in the seed trench without actually pressing down on the seed trench. So you know, that just goes to show you the benefits of furrow force. Now I wish I could put furrow force on my front units, but because of the frame design and everything, there's just not enough clearance to put it on the front units. So I mean, I'm stuck with the traditional V-style closing wheels. But on soybeans, it's not going to be as critical as it is with, say, corn or cotton. So I'm pretty happy with the way my planter's set up. And when we get into double crop beans, the soil's usually a lot drier, and the V-style system, it performs pretty good. It's just typically early season when you get into a really kind of wetter and heavier conditions that it can really pack that seed in, and it has a little bit harder time coming up. So here's another example. Furrow force, this row, then the V-style right here. You can see it's a little bit thinner stand, and then we get back over here to the furrow force and it looks a lot better. So overall, yeah, to y'all right here, this looks kind of crappy, like I really don't know what I'm doing farming, but trust me, you give it a couple weeks, it's going to look picture perfect out here. So overall, soybean crop, I only got 80 acres of it, but I'm really happy with what we got. You know, unlike last year where we had to do a bunch of replanting, not going to do any replanting on soybeans. They were planted, you know, they were planted early. So as of right now, we still got 100% yield potential on soybeans. Still got a long ways to go though. So got soybeans out of the way. Let's go look at some cotton. All right, here we are out here in one of our cotton fields here. And we only planted this about 10 days ago, so it's going to be kind of hard to see what's out here, but I'll try and give you a close look. But we do have a stand of cotton. Do we have a perfect stand of cotton? No. Do we have a better stand of cotton than last year? Absolutely. Problem we come into the cotton crop this year is when we started out planting, it was really dry, so we planted the cotton a little bit deeper, really hunting for moisture. And then after that, we got some pretty heavy rains, so we was putting the cotton seed about 1.5 inches in the ground. If you know anything about cotton, you know it's the biggest sissy on coming up. It looks for, it's like a lazy teenager. It looks for every reason to stay in bed, not get out of bed in the morning. And that's kind of what we saw. We planted a little too deep for the conditions that followed. But we've got a good enough stand that we're not going to have to do any replanting. Now the end rows are worse than what we're seeing out here in the middle of the field. But still, well, we're not having any slug pressure this year. It's been generally warm enough and sunny enough to minimize any kind of slug pressure. and the cotton is up and it's starting to grow. It's going to take forever to look decent because that's just the way cotton is. It just kind of comes up and it just seems like it sits there forever and ever and ever as it starts building its root system, and then it'll start growing up. But we are going to have to spray cotton this week for thrips. See if I can find any here. All right, I don't know if you can see it, but right there, crawling on my thumb, that's a thrip. So we got thrips out here. As you can tell, right there, that little bud, that's our first true leaf. And it's looking a little crinkled. That's a sure sign of thrip pressure. So in order to promote earliness in this cotton crop, get it off to a quick start so it doesn't delay maturity, we're going to have to get out here with some bug juice and spray for thrips. The thrip pressure isn't near as bad as what it was last year, but with all the wheat in the area starting to dry down, thrips are really going to be moving in and hammering this cotton. And until it gets on along about 3 true leaves, it just is really vulnerable to thrips, and they can really slow down the maturity of this cotton. So we'll get out here probably tomorrow with some Roundup. We got some cover crops starting to put back out and some acephate, and get these thrips cleaned up. Now overall, what we're seeing on the cotton stand, overall it's good. There's going to be some really thin areas in a few spots of the fields that, I mean, really technically should be replanted, but I mean, we're all talking about a small spot here, small spot there, generally on the end rows, and really it just doesn't make any sense to replant it. But what we've definitely noticed is a difference in manufacture and how well the cotton is emerging. What we found out is that our Delta pine cotton, while it may yield great and everything, it's harder to get it to come up, and it just doesn't seem to have the early season vigor that what phytogen does. Our phytogen cotton looks a lot better than this. The cotyledons are nice and big, and just, you know, it doesn't look kind of sickly like what this cotton does right here. It's just got a lot better early season vigor. Now, is that going to translate to yield? It may, or it may not. I know typically the Delta pine varieties tend to yield better than what the phytogen do, but if your cotton just sitting there struggling and not growing, or if it doesn't come up, well, then the phytogen is going to out yield it because it comes up to a nice pretty stand and it doesn't struggle as much early season. Now, we did have what we call our blackberry winter. We did have it last week. It was typically, it was actually pretty mild, but it was wet all last week with definitely below average temperatures, which caused the cotton to just sit here, and it can be attacked by thrips, and if it's not warm enough for it to grow, it's just sitting there being eaten on by pests, and it can really stunt its growth. So, but luckily it was pretty mild. For as long as we get in here and spray thrips tomorrow, I don't think there'll be any adverse effects on this cotton crop, and think it's going to be pretty good. Now, tying back the planter systems here, as you can tell, we got a really thick cover crop here. We had a lot of annual ryegrass, some crimson clover, and cereal rye here. Those were the species that survived the winter, and we got a really thick mat. But if you can look at the seed trench down through here, you can see where the row cleaners really threw it off to the side and gave us a fairly clean seed bed to plant into, and that was absolutely critical for getting our cotton seed in the ground. Now, last year, before we added the clean sweep to it, this cover crop is thick enough that the row cleaners, they would have dug down some in the cover crop and they would have parted some of it out of the way, but it would have been riding along the top of a lot of it, and the double disc openers would have had a hard time getting a nice clean seed trench for the seed to fall into, and then you could have some cover crop kind of laying over that seed trench that would have deflected the seed and kept it from going in the seed trench, and we'd have a few seeds scattered along the top. Well, that clean sweep, we're able to add downforce to the row cleaners and force it to, instead of riding along some of this cover crop, to really dig down there and get to the soil and scoot it all out of the way. And as you can see right there, it did a picture perfect job, and that's why we added it to the planter, is for that reason right there. I'd say the clean sweep system, I mean, it's already paid for itself by allowing us to get a good stand of cotton out here. And also what we've seen in these heavy conditions is the typical double disc closers that we were running just would not close the seed trench very well at all. You can tell right there, man, that seed trench closed up tight. And where that's important is minimizing any kind of slug damage. If you got an open seed trench in here, you know, the cotton seedling might emerge. If it can pick up enough moisture from the soil, it might emerge, but you got a trench right there for a slug just to crawl down and be protected from the sun and heat and everything else. And it's like a 24-hour buffet as it moves this way down an open seed trench, just munching on these seedlings that are just that are just starting to emerge. So the key is to get your seed trench closed really well, and that way a slug cannot attack the plant until it's up above the soil. And once it's above the soil, it's got a lot better fighting chance of surviving any kind of slug pressure. And that's what we're seeing this year. There were slugs out here. I found them on top of the ground, but they weren't able to attack the seed. And now that it's up, yes, if the blackberry winter had been colder and longer than what it was, you know, the cotton just sitting here, yes, slugs could have damaged the stand a little bit more. But by ensuring we got the seed trench closed, it did its job, and it did an absolutely fantastic job. I was really blown away by the furrow force. The only problem I saw with the furrow force is when you get in cover crop this thick, that there was a chance that those double disc wheels, that they could wrap up and eventually they would stop turning. I think in 500 acres of cotton, I had to clean a few of them off, you know, 2 or maybe 3 times. So it wasn't a big deal at all. They didn't wrap up that bad, and overall they did an absolutely phenomenal job. And I'd recommend them to anybody. Bottom line is, on the planter, I think I've got it set up to pretty much plant into just about any condition that I can encounter. Now, it's been a very expensive investment, but as expensive as the farm, as expensive as seed is, and the lost profit potential that you have by having to go in and replant, I think it's been money extremely well invested by me. And if Precision Planting would just iron out some of the gremlins they got with, you know, some of the wiring harnesses and some of the hardware maybe not being as tough as what it should be, right now I think they got the best system on the market. But if they get those few gremlins ironed out, I think that they would be absolutely untouchable. It's expensive, but in my opinion, it's definitely worth it. So be interested to hear of your experience with Precision Planting. If you're a farmer and you run that kind of system, I'd be interested in hearing your experiences, and just let me know what you think of the systems that you're running in the comments, and let me know what systems you're running. I think I've got most of the ones that they offer on my planter. I know there's a few others that really don't apply to our operation, but if there's something else out there you think I'd be interested in looking at, let me know in the comments below. So we got one more stop on this crop tour. Doesn't have anything to do with planter performance, but we're gonna let y'all see what my wheat crop looks like. We haven't really covered it that much ever since we got it planted and then got it fertilized. We've been busy covering other stuff, but we got a heck of a wheat crop on our hands, so let's go out the field and see what it looks like. All right, last stop on our crop tour. I'm sorry about the glare off my forehead. You're wearing a helmet, you can't really wear a hat too, so y'all's gonna have to live with it. But last stop, this doesn't have anything to do with planter performance or anything. We're out in the wheat field. Of course, it was planted with a drill, but want to show y'all what our wheat crop looked like. We're getting really close to harvest. You can tell wheat's pretty much done and starting to dry down. If you've been following us for a while, you know last year we had an absolutely record-breaking wheat crop. Just absolutely phenomenal. We averaged almost 100 bushels an acre, like 99.3 bushels per acre. This year, we're gonna have an awesome wheat crop. Will it top last year's? I don't think so. We had a lot better cotton planting weather this year, and when you have good cotton planting weather, that's not necessarily conducive to making super high yields on wheat, because cotton planting weather, you want really hot conditions for that cotton to get going, come up, going and blowing. And well, hot temperatures really speeds up wheat maturity and doesn't give it as much time to fill grain. So while we got, you know, great looking stand out here, we got some nice heads. The heads are filled out nicely. It's a little bit ahead as far as maturity, and that means that it did not have as much time to fill grain. So the grain will probably be a little bit lighter. However, I am expecting really good yields, probably more along lines with what's typical for us, probably somewhere between 80 and 90 bushels if I had to guess. I may be wrong, I don't know. We did have a cool spell last week right as the wheat was finishing up grain fill. So, you know, there's a chance. I mean, it could surprise me. We might have a little above that. I don't know. But regardless, we're going to have a good wheat crop, I believe, unless we just happen to get a hailstorm in here before we get a combine. I mean, we're seeing some nice, big, fat heads. You know, normally on a head right here, I call each one of these little things a spikelet, if it's even focusing. But normally we get about 15 spikelets per head. Well, this year we're seeing 16 to 17 spikelets per head. I counted this one. I think this is 18 spikelets per head. Each spikelet typically has 3 seed in there. And what I'm seeing 1, 2, 3. I'm seeing a 4th one in there. The 4th one's kind of small. Really don't think he'll contribute much to yield, or he'll even stay in the combine. But we're seeing, you know, 3 big seed and a 4th smaller seed in there. So, you know, we might have enough extra seeds out here to make up for these seeds possibly not being as heavy. I don't know. But this is some of my later planted wheat. I'm actually thinking there's a chance maybe late this week, some of our earliest planted wheat might be ready to go test out with a combine. So, you know, we're gonna have we got a pretty warm week coming up this week. Should really help this grain dry down quickly. But overall, I'm really pleased with the wheat crop. Probably not going to be record breaking. I don't know if I'll ever have another record breaking year after what we had last year. But we're gonna have a really good wheat crop. Got awesome prices for it, and really can't wait to get the combine out here. Start cutting some of this and putting it in the bin. You know, not seeing any disease out here on the flag leaves that are still green. Not seeing any fusarium head blight out here. Might have gotten a little bit of fusarium head blight on that head right there. There at the top, it's not filled out. But overall, I think we're going to have a high yielding, high quality crop. Really excited about it. Well, guys, that kind of concludes our crop tour. Just to give you a snapshot of what we're looking at. You know, we was busy spraying the week before last, busy repairing stuff during the rain this last week. This week coming up, we got some spraying to do, soybeans and cotton. Finished getting our wheat stuff ready to go, and here real shortly we're going to be getting back real busy again and have some good harvesting videos coming up for y'all to watch. So anyway, I hope you like these last 2 videos, especially if you're trying to decide to go with a precision planting system. Hope it gave you a little bit of independent perspective to it and help you make that decision. So appreciate y'all watching. We'll be back again soon.